permit gurus.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't see Bob, but
All did all that too.
Jim, are you here? Andrews?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to start with the rat snake and the rattlesnake?
I think really John is the one to start with that
Well,
permit.
no, I get that, but I guess, well, I was gonna say, while Bob wasn't here with it, would you want to start with snakes?
Sure.
okay. Let's do that.
Okay.
Just with my spare hand, I'm texting Bob, trying to remind him to call.
Bob's here now. We got Bob.
Oh, okay. Great.
Oh, were they? Yeah, that's all right.
We can put plans ahead.
So maybe I'll start this one by saying the first time I'm talking to all of you since the last Endangered Species Committee meeting, in which I said I would work at getting you applications sooner and so that you could have more time to work on them or to contemplate them, and maybe not include them with a draft permit. The very first one I'm bringing to you is a draft permit to rush through the system, because it's just the way it seemed to work out with this one. So apologies to begin with. The VTrans came to us a few weeks ago and had a project that seemed to be a bit of a surprise to us, doing some resurfacing on Route 22A in an area that a subset of it is home to or is adjacent to rattlesnake habitat, and the entire stretch could be habitat for rat snakes. They had one arm of the contracting arm of VTrans was super eager to get the project contracted so they could do the work this summer, and they really weren't going to wait for us. So rather than tell them to get a permit, you have to go through the full process, and we're going to go to the SAGs and then to the ESC, and then maybe we'll come back to you when we're ready. Luke Groff and I worked with VTrans environmental team, and then we went over to the HERP SAG to put together some permit conditions so that VTrans's contracts group could get the project bid on. It doesn't mean that the project is, or that we're locked into this, but it'd be really good if we could work within this framework so that it doesn't upend too much of VTrans work or contracting work. And one of the big picture pieces, this is just resurfacing of portions of the road within the existing footprint of the road, no work on the shoulders. And in 2 or 3 years, they're going to begin a project of significant improvements to Route 22, and in which we're hoping that they will install a number of underpasses for snakes and other reptiles and amphibians. So this is just a small piece with hopeful much bigger progress coming in the near future. So I could give you a quick overview of this if that's what you'd like. In short, there's a small section of Route 22A where they will be doing some sort of spot work filling in ruts and patching, and then a longer section, about a 16-mile section, where they're going to be doing the full surface of the road, not digging anything up, just putting like a new coat down, like a layer of icing across the road. That will run for several weeks. The main things we did to try and protect snakes was to get V-Trans to agree that basically on a number of avoidance and minimization steps. So they will, the key things will be, there will be no, what's the word, staging within key areas of the project. Certainly no vehicles parked, no equipment stored, no gravel or anything piled up anywhere in the areas most associated with rattlesnakes. And then outside of that, Luke Groff will work with the project engineer on selecting staging areas with the idea that those are the places that are most likely to, if a snake was to show up on inside the project footprint, that those would be the places where that would happen. And V-Trans was very cooperative working on that. The next piece was sort of what happens, once the project gets started. And the main thing that we want them to look out for, well, I should say Luke Groff felt that as long as they are working within the footprint of the road and they don't have those staging areas that in places that will attract snakes, we've achieved most of the conservation wins right there, or the protections for the snakes. Now, there's certainly some possibility that snakes will show up or maybe be drawn to the site because of hot pavement might seem attractive to them, even in midsummer. So there will be sort of 2 layers of monitoring and, if needed, snake wrangling that will come in. If snakes are seen, V-Trans has agreed their crews will stop work within 100 feet of the project of the snake and work elsewhere along the road. If the snake seems to be staying, well, their road crews will send photos to Jim and a couple of Luke and Doug Blodgett, who can be available to move snakes if needed. And I think that, and then there will be some reporting, but that's the main pieces of the permit. And we'll also have the project engineer go back and take a look at areas that were, say, worked on the day before to see if there were any roadkill in those stretches, over the succeeding day or two, to see if the road work itself maybe attracts snakes to the road. In Luke's thinking, it's probably not much potential for that, considering in midsummer roads are pretty warm as is, and there'll actually be less traffic on the roads, or certainly slower traffic on the roads during the construction phase than a normal day when there's 5,000 vehicles that pass on those sections of Route 22A each day. Okay, that was a very fast overview. Jim, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And does anyone have any questions, suggestions, recommendations?
Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Oh, other Jim.
Well, other Jim.
Mr. Shallow.
Yes. Hi, John. Thanks for this update. It's good to hear. I was curious about how it played into the future plans to realign the road. do all that work. So that's helpful. Just looking through the permit conditions, I was curious, and I was reading it quick, so if I missed this, is there gonna be a biologist? I mean, or are you gonna, is somebody gonna be trained from the road crew, doing this work, in terms of like identification or anything, or how's that gonna work?
So a good question. In talking with Luke, and then after we talked with the herp sag, we didn't feel like the chance that there would be so many snakes actually showing up that was it worth it to hire a consulting biologist to be standing around there for several weeks over the summer. The feeling was probably not, and that if road crew members could take photos of snakes they see, and essentially regardless of the species, and send that to Jim, Luke, Doug Blodgett, it'd probably be the safest way to get a determination rather than asking someone else to figure out what the snake might be. I mean, I think, as maybe Jim said, if it's got stripes, it's a garter snake. If not, let's send us photos. And so that was the thought, or that is the working hypothesis for the project.
In addition, John, I think we could add that you mentioned it briefly, but Luke is going to do a little upfront training.
Oh yeah,
with people working on site.
Yeah, that's what I was just wondering. Like, yeah, so that addresses my concern. At least some sort of like, this is a snake. This is a, that kind of thing. Even minimal, I think, would help improve the odds.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mention it. Yeah, there's going to be a meeting with the project leaders. Luke has sort of a standard talk he goes through with those. They'll probably bring along a warden, because the road crews really respond well to wardens, and that. Hopefully that will get things started, and someone from VTrans Environmental will be there also to underscore the importance of following the rules and the fact that these are state protected species. Hey, Brian.
This looks great. Just one question. I'm sorry, I'm back to the meeting late, so I may have missed it. Is there an anticipated taking here? An expected taking, or is this, precautionary?
It's really, I think, really precautionary, and based on Luke's, thinking. There's probably not a great draw as it is to the road compared to a summer day when it's warm. Traffic will be moving slower. So yeah, I would say it's non-zero, but it's probably not close to 1.
Okay, especially when it comes to timber rattlers, I assume. Yeah, okay. Okay. I know we weren't going to, well, I was going to talk about mosquitoes and bats, but I'm kind of wondering the risk, I guess the risk is, well, I don't frankly know how this differs. Like, why we're requiring a permit here if there really isn't an anticipated taking? That this is precautionary.
In this case, there are some clear actions I think that could be taken to further reduce risk. Mainly the specifically where they set up or do not set up staging areas, where they pile up equipment. Or park vehicles and or store gravel. Keep getting those out of sensitive places is possible without substantive undermining of the project. So
yeah,
that's the main piece.
Yeah, and the conditions look great. Conditions look rigorous.
I would add that we give attention to this section of road because parts of it are no more than a quarter to a half a mile from the one of the known dens, and snakes have certainly shown up dead on this section of road before, both rat snakes and rattlesnakes. I don't think there's a tremendous additional risk from this work, but it certainly is in a sensitive area.
Yep. Hey,
I
Paul?
was gonna just ask one other question, and that was, and you know, maybe you could weigh in on this, Jim. So, you know, in the searches, it says each morning a construction project is active during, you know, there'll be a search. When would you expect snakes to be most likely to use the road if it was a heat source? Would they actually be out there really early, you know, like overnight? Or in other words, should somebody be doing the search at first light? Or would they be coming out after they've warmed up a little as the morning goes on?
Well, that all depends on the time of year that they're actually going to end up being there. I mean, rattlesnakes will be active at night on a warm summer night if they were there at that time. But if they actually did the construction outside of the active snake period, it would be mid-afternoon would be the highest risk because it would get warm enough for something to actually move. So it depends a lot on the time of year.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would be the only thing that I would have to say is I'd hate to, you know, signify a morning search and have it be sort of outside of a, you know, time when snakes might be, you know, vulnerable or high, you know, more vulnerable. Like if somebody's, you know, not searching until, you know, 7 in the morning and it's been light for 2 to 3 hours already, it seems like that, you know, minimizes the efficacy of searching.
That's a good point, and happily talk with that with VTrans about that and maybe adjust that. In our conversation, they really seem to be focused on like getting the work done in summer, but we set the, you know, they set the period for, you know, May through October, just in case. We can work on that. Paul, do you have a question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, I was just ready to make a motion. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the secretary approve the V-Trans permit for incidental taking of rattlesnake and rat snake.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Further discussion? Yeah, I guess I would just like to say with the, you know, I don't know, friendly suggestion that we look a little bit more carefully at when those morning searches take place to ensure that we minimize risk to snakes that might be spending the night on a road.
Will do.
Other comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it passes.
Thank you.
Bob,
Okay,
you want to start?
let's start with this second one, the Shepherd Colchester one, because you all
Oh, yeah, right.
have seen that before. At least we discussed it in concept at your last meeting. So the only thing that's new is the Florida Advisory Group's advice, which I don't believe I've seen until, well, maybe.
Nope,
I didn't see that
media.
So just to refresh you, this is a proposed residential subdivision on Blakely Road in Colchester. And it's the one where the consultants went out early in the summer and found one plant of hoot and sedge. And then subsequently, they were required to do an archaeological survey, which entailed plowing this whole field. And that stirred up the seed bank. Consultant came back, there were over 400 plants scattered around the site. So they've sort of done their best to minimize their impact. It's a 20 acre parcel, and they're going to put in, I believe it's 28 units, most of them duplexes. So they eliminated, I guess, 2 houses, shortened a couple of driveways and reconfigured it a little bit. And the grand tally is they're going to take 40-something plants, and they're going to move them to a conservation area. And the conservation area will be protected with fencing, and they'll need to do the usual 5 years of monitoring of invasive species. So the Florida Advisory Group actually met with the engineer who came to one of our meetings and attended it, didn't come to it, attended it, and discussed this project. We asked for a few other things that he felt they were unable to comply with because of town regulations regarding setbacks, driveway sizes, blocking sidewalks, etc. So, I mean, you have to take the engineer at his word that this is the best they can do, which, you know, is always questionable, but so be it. So we're recommending approval of the permit with a few additional conditions that they didn't specifically offer to do, and that would be monitoring and control of invasive species within 25 feet of the conservation area. Educational signage, something to, you know, say conservation area, please keep out. Guarantees against incursion, so they're going to put up a split rail fence. But the other problem is our T&E permits just go for 5 years, and this signage and this fence needs to be maintained in perpetuity. So the thought, I mean, there's 2 options here, and I guess Catherine's not on today, is you can renew the permit every 5 years, which gets to be a logistical pain, and somebody needs to remember to do that. Or probably the cleaner way to do it would be to put a condition in the Act 250 permit about this fence, which it hasn't gone through Act 250 yet. So we will, that would be probably the best way to proceed. They've also collected seeds from the hoot and sedge that have been stored at the Native Plant Trust, and they will be utilized if the plant seems to decline. Just as a way of summary and background information, this is a short-lived perennial that seed banks really, really well. This plant has been known from this site for 20-something years, and it's been declining because there hasn't been any disturbance. And they just came in and did a light kind of plowing, and it just exploded. So that's typically how its life cycle. That's it. They're going to they agreed to do management, like brush hogging of the conservation area, like every year or 2, because again, this plant doesn't do well with a lot of competition. And there's also 2 septic fields nearby, which have a conservation mix on them, and those will be mowed periodically as well. And that the plant could move it fund for that, possibly, hard to say. I guess I can stop there. There's questions and, yeah, Paul, is that you?
Yeah, yeah. Got a few questions. One about the management, but the first one is this potent sedge. How did this plant sort of fit into the ecology of the sandplain forest in Vermont? If it seems like it's a species that grows in full sun, open areas, is that right? And if so, what kind of conditions existed prior to colonization that allowed for this thing to exist in this area? And then I'll ask my next question after you answer that.
That's good. I can only remember 2 questions at a time.
Yeah.
That's
There's only
exactly
one.
what I call it. It is a plant of open areas. It doesn't do well under a canopy, and it needs periodic disturbance. How it got there, I mean, I think there's always been disturbances. In this case, they're mostly anthropogenic, but in the past they were more natural. Blowdowns, fires. There was some sand blowouts. I've seen pictures in the 30s where the sand was blowing across some of the roads, and after close the roads, they were impassable because of sand buildup. It's pretty impressive. Kind of get caught. Fortunately, those days are long gone. We'll never see them again in Vermont. So, thank you. Did I answer your first question?
Yeah, more or less. So that also kind of brings up a management thing question. In the description of the maintenance or planting of it, actually, you talk about the plants are going to get spaced like in 2-foot intervals, and then somebody's going to come in and put bark mulch down around each plant. Well, if they do that, it seems to me that at a 2-foot spacing, you're basically going to have a continuous bark mulch substrate over the entire area where these things are planted. And that doesn't seem to me like the kind of habitat that this plant would really want. It seems that photos that you show bare soil, which probably, is really what this thing wants. The bark mulch is going to encourage other things to grow that you probably don't want. And then the final thing is that there may be a need here to also talk about, the homeowners association might think, well, wouldn't it be a great idea to plant some trees in this area, with all good intentions, when in fact that would be counterproductive to the maintenance of the population of this plant. So somewhere in that, management plan, I think that probably needs to get spelled out, that that what the conditions are that this plant requires. And to continue with that thought, it seems like there should be some sort of maybe a very short narrative that sort of describes, what these rare plants are all about, what they need, and that everybody that buys a piece of property there gets one of these descriptions of what they've just inherited. So those would be my additions that I would recommend be added. So I don't know what you think about the bark mulch thing, but that doesn't seem like that makes a ton of sense to me.
There's a landscape of them. The bark mulch was suggested by the consultant who did the management plan, who knows a lot about this plant. And his intent, and I've seen this happen before, this plant occurs at some electric utility substations. And what we've seen, at least the 1 or 2 other sites, is that one of the strongest competitors is actually lichens. You get this crustose lichen that spreads over the ground, and it kind of out the flat sedge. So I think the idea of the bark mulch was to inhibit the lichens from coming in, but maybe it's counterproductive. Maybe flat sedge directly.
Well, it's gonna add organic matter as it breaks down over time, which is gonna encourage things that want, that would
That's something we're
capitalize on that.
considering. And I'll take that up with the consultant. The other point, goes back to what I spoke to earlier, that we need something more long-term. And that's why we're thinking of putting a condition in the Act 250 permit that, you know, the fencing, the signage needs to be maintained, and the homeowners association needs to take on some responsibility for maintaining these plants. And I don't know exactly what that'll look like. We'll have to deal with the, interact with the Act 250 folks when it comes up to Act 250 and make sure those conditions. But I'll consult with Catherine about how best to do that.
Yeah, it seems like if there's some way to make it sound or feel like as a homeowner, you're, you know, this is a good thing that you've been charged with this protection of this really cool plant, and you know, rather than kind of an onerous thing where they're, you can't do this and you can't do that. So anyway, I don't know how that works with Act 250, but
playing there. And dogs and kids, but maybe that's not a bad thing. That's the periodic disturbance. Kids out there doing big sand castles, right?
Right.
I think that somebody does.
Yeah, if I could just interject for a second on the bark mulch point. It's a great question, Paul, and it's one that I forget if it was on this particular permit or a different species with similar kinds of requirements where this was proposed, and we in the advisory group we had the exact same reaction as you had, Paul. And correct me if I'm misrepresenting Bob, but my recollection is the consultant said it's not what you're picturing as a big 4-inch thick layer of bark mulch like people put around landscaping trees. This is intended to be more of a thin sprinkling that maybe conserves a little moisture, but also partially serves as a marking for follow-up monitoring. That's my recollection of how this was described. So a little bit different than what the notion of a bark mulch ring initially calls to mind.
I think it was 2 inches is what their recommendation was. Is that right? Maybe I got that wrong. Maybe it was 2 feet spacing, but something was 2. But anyway, it's all about who puts it down.
Yes, and I think the consultant involved certainly, I think, understands the nature of the plant's requirements and how a thick layer would be detrimental. But that's just my sense of the conversation around it.
Yep.
Yeah, Brian.
Well, I guess this is an interesting challenge. I mean, we're not, in terms of getting the whole buy-in from the homeowners, we're not talking about like common loons or Ram's Head lady slippers here, and I'm just wondering, Bob, and we'll support this permit, I suspect, and the conditions look like the flag gave it good consideration, but like, how do you make a sedge interesting to the homeowners association? To many of them, it's going to look like something that gets mowed, So, I don't know whether you've thought about it. It's like I can get excited. I myself can get excited about a sedge. I got excited about Rhynchospora species, in Florida when I was down there. But I'm just wondering if this seems realistic to you. Or Matt, Matt can chime in on this too,
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know how you get non-plant geeks excited about this little sedge. I mean, I think that it's totally neat, but again, I think you and I are a bit outliers in this one.
I'll give you a couple ideas. I mean, if this whole area is surrounded by a split rail fence, that's obviously going to be an attractive. People are going to, want to walk at least around it, maybe not in it. But you know, art is one way to get people to, you know, take notice of things. You know, what if there was like a, you know, a statue, you know, some sort of a statue of a, you know, 10X, you know,
Sedge
sedge,
God.
Periginium.
there, and maybe a painting that goes, you know, something that's weatherproof, but, you know, a painting of, you know, a sedge meadow or something like that. I mean, people, you know, I mean, magnify the beauty of the sedge and get people excited about it. And maybe, you know, maybe there could even be an art contest or something like that. You put all the entries out there. Yeah. I think
I like that.
I think art would be a good way to consider, you know, how you might magnify the species and, you know, bring it to people's attention.
Yeah, people like having something special. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily need to be,
Yeah.
you know, an amazing orchid. Sedges have edges.
Yep.
How are the Periginia on these? Are they sexy?
Not a carrot, it doesn't have any.
I thought it's a carex.
No, it's a cyperus.
Oh, sorry. See, I shouldn't be a Flora member.
Well, it's the confusion between Houghton's flat sedge and Houghton's sedge, which
Okay.
we're dealing with both. lately.
Wow. Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
And it does, you know, just so you know, in the floor advice, somewhere it does say broom sedge as well, that we should probably keep an eye on that.
We're not like birds, we don't have standardized common names,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I can't find anything about the depth of the mulch.
Well, do you want to, does anyone want to make a motion?
No more than 2 inches.
Paul?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess I would make a motion that, you know, we recommend to the secretary that she approve of this permit with a couple of added conditions. What do you guys think about, you know, my thoughts concerning shading and, you know, no trees planted within, you know, X feet of the split rail fence? Is that too
I mean,
restrictive or?
I mean, I think we should give it a shot. The heck.
So I would, you know, I don't know what we say. I mean, no shade trees within, we could just say no shade trees that would have the potential to shade the conservation area over time.
If I can jump in here, I'm looking at the
Yep.
site plan. And it looks like there's 3 units that are fairly close to the conservation area and on the south side. So they would probably be the ones maybe to prohibit from planting trees, at least in their backyards nearest the conservation area.
I mean, we don't want to restrict them from planting trees. We want to restrict them from planting something that would grow tall enough to impact the site.
We can encourage them to plant ash because they'll all die.
Oh, man.
I got a joke about it.
Jeez. All right.
Yeah, I like that. I think also to suggest that we do look into additional conditions for the Act 50, 250 permitting to have some, I don't know, signage or additional monitoring beyond the period of the permit. I mean, I don't think art is going to be part of the permit, but Bob, if you continue to have conversations with folks, maybe we'd love to see some sedge art go up. Sedge art.
I will volunteer to go there with the macro lens and take some really, really good photos of this thing.
Nice, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nice.
I personally like Cyperus better than Carex, but yeah.
Wait, is that because it's better for bobolinks?
I just think, I don't know, Cyperus are, I don't know, I just find them really cute. I'm not, I mean, yeah, but I love their growth form. All right.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
You get that in a minute.
Being recorded.
So we have a motion, but then we talked about Act 250 conditions, which was not part of the motion. The motion was to recommend the secretary approve the permit with added condition about trees,
Yeah,
but then we started about Act 250 and looking into.
yeah, I guess that's not gonna be part of the permit, but we would recommend that, as Bob continues, or, you know, anybody, Fish and Wildlife personnel continue to work with the, you know, engineer consultant that we think about, something in an Act 250 permit, so.
And then there was an issue about the mulching. I discussed that with the consultant too. Yeah, it's, Paul, it's the monitoring plan says up to 2 inches, so that would be a max.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's all about who's putting it down, who's doing it. You know, what the contract says, you know, we get paid for more mulch, we can put more mulch down.
Yeah, I think the consultants will be doing it. They're going to be putting the mulch in when they move the plants.
The consultant is running the pitchfork, throwing the stuff around.
I think they might hand dig them just with a shovel.
Uh-huh.
Talked about putting them on burlap. Yeah.
Tough digging in the sand though, huh?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard.
No, I mean, in terms of creating a ball so that it doesn't fall apart and, you know, it's a problem for transplanting, but it seems like you guys have looked at that in the conditions about the importance of irrigating after or before September 15th, if my memory serves me correct, which is great.
They'd have to water through the end of the growing season.
What's that?
They would water through the end of the growing season until like.
Right, exactly.
Weekly.
Okay, you ready to vote? Did we get a second?
Not yet.
Brian?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, permit passes with the additional advisory notes and condition about the minimizing shade.
Maybe there's some seed that can get saved for the Wizarek sandplain forest over by the airport.
Yeah.
I'm with you with that one, Paul. I wouldn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
That was Alan's idea to call it that, not mine. He said that, so.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Okay, next, which one, where do you want to go to next?
Let's do Harry Lettuce. That's the Velco. So this is a new one that you all haven't seen, and it's a full replacement on the Velco line in St. George, adjacent to like 116 somewhere. And I was out to the site, and if you looked at the site plan that came with the permit, it's very steep, and it is they are gonna have a number of constraints where they can actually operate to get their equipment in. This was a known site for hairy lettuce, and the consultant went out and indeed found it's still there. Just as a bit of background, hairy lettuce is a biennial and it's monocarpic. So it sends up a basal rosette the first year, second year it flowers and then dies. So given that, there's no incentive to move flowering or fruiting plants because they're dead. They're gone once they fruit and flower. They will be collecting seeds from them. They're going to be moving first year plants only, which brings up another problem. There's a closely related species. I don't know. It's like Lactuca canadensis. It's like Canada blue lettuce or something like that. And the only way they can be distinguished is when they flower or fruit. So obviously, first year plants are inseparable. You can't distinguish them. So they're going to have to err on the side of caution and move every Lactuca species that they find, assuming that it could be the hairy lettuce. And they've agreed to do that. So the intent, I think, is to do it, well, this summer. They need to do the work. And they need to know, well, pretty far in advance. From what Velco tells me, they're going to actually have to shut the power off. So there's like a residential neighborhood nearby. These people are going to lose their power for like a matter of hours or a day or so, and they want to give them like a couple of weeks warning, like when the exact day and hour it's going to happen, so people can plan accordingly. So it's got to be pretty precise timing when they bring the equipment in. So obviously the plants need to be moved before the equipment comes in. So that's kind of what's running this whole thing. So the members, Florida Advisory Group members discussed this, and I heard back from a few of them about the permit, and nobody was opposed to it. Everybody kind of supported it and saw that it was, there's no way really around it. With a couple of caveats, they proposed moving the plants in mid-August, and the advisory group thought waiting to even mid-September would be best, or even early September if possible. They also going to water if there was, I think, less than half an inch of rain, and the members thought that was not sufficient, that it should be at least an inch of rain. So if there's less than an inch, they should be watering through the growing season. And then there would also be control of invasives within 25 feet of the transplant area. And that's with the caveat, the area is rampant with invasives. So there's no way, I mean, we acknowledge there's no way that invasives are going to be eradicated in this right of way. But the point is just to give the plants a little bit of room to get established, just that they're not overwhelmed by invasives right away. I mean, eventually it's going to happen, and hopefully they'll find a spot to persist, but at least, let them get a head start. I think that was about it. So they're estimating 10 individuals, but there's really no way of telling, because when the consultant went out there, he counted second-year plants that are not going to be there this year, and he looked at the first-year plants and counted those, but there's no way of telling which species they are. They could be all Lactuca hirsuta, or they could all be canadensis. It could be a mix of both, and nobody knows the proportions. So we won't know how many plants are going to be impacted until like midsummer. So this is the plant. It flowers maybe late July, early August. So you can't even really identify it until say the first week of August or so, to be safe. I guess that covers it. So if there's questions, Brian, is that you?
Brian?
Sorry, yeah, my hand was from the last. I'll just ask briefly, is Velco, do you know if Velco is okay with these suggested conditions?
I do not, and I'm sure they'll be fine with them, with the exception of maybe the first one. That is the date. They may be locked into the, as early as August 15th. That I'm not sure. And if they tell us that's when they've got to do it, I don't know that. I mean, what are we going to say? We can make them delay or not. I mean, we can encourage them to, I suppose.
How mission critical is that? Is that September, moving it to September?
Paul can address this too, but, moving plants during the middle of the summer is never a good idea. And I was going to say, especially flowering plants, but we wouldn't be moving any of the flowering plants. The other thing is, Brian, is that the flowering individuals, which are not going to be moved, it would be really good to collect seeds, but the seeds aren't going to be matured by August 15th. We need to, it wouldn't be September until the seeds are matured. So if those plants are destroyed, they're pretty much lost forever. Unless you can dig them up and put them in a flower pot and hope they survive enough to mature the fruit, then you can collect the seeds.
So how about if seed is collected from the same species, there's a bunch of other plants in the nearby, correct? Then why not just collect seed from those and actually germinate the seed off-site and then take the resulting seedlings that you have germinated next spring and go back to the site and actually plant new plants. So, because it just doesn't sound like this is really going to work. I mean, you're going to dig a whole bunch of plants with the idea that maybe 1 out of 10 of them or something is the right plant. I don't know, kind of seems silly in some ways, where if you went and collected seed from another population, you could probably only, even if you collected 50 seed and 10% of them germinated, which seems super, super low, you would still come out ahead. And you'd have 5 plants versus maybe 1, which is what you're really, the end result is going to be.
So you're suggesting doing that instead of moving the first year plants?
Yeah. Because you can't, like you said, you can't wait for the seed to ripen. It's going to be too late.
Well, if they have to do it before like September 15th, I think.
Yeah. But I would even recommend either way. Why not just, increase your chances of having viable seedlings the following spring. I mean, you're going to have predation from insects or whatever. Just collect a bunch of seed, and there's probably some folks who would be willing to even grow. I don't know how you would do that in house or what, but I would think that. Well, actually, I know of one person who does like to grow native plants, who's a commercial perennial grower right in Essex. And she might be flattered that, she could be part of a project like this. So, there's really kind of a movement now with a lot of growers and a lot of people that are involved in, what we generally consider landscapers, which is a super broad word that covers way too many different things. But anyway, people who are out there planting stuff are very interested in becoming more involved with native plant introduction, and particularly paying attention to ecotypes from our area. But anyway, so there's hope. There's help and hope out there within the plant growing community. So can reach out to those folks.
Well, I could certainly take this up with Velco and see if they would consider doing that if, yeah, I just hate to write off the plans and not even try to move them, but.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only thing that would be different is that something has to happen the next spring, right? As opposed to everything happening, within the year of the project, but someone would have to go back there in the spring to do the planting of the seedlings. And then monitoring those, I guess, but.
Yeah. Well, one other option would be, I think we can certainly collect seed from, other plants that are not going to be impacted and possibly from the ones that are going to be impacted and give those to Native Plant Trust. And if none of the transplants survive, that would be a backup. It's like, okay, then you need to germinate some seeds and jumpstart the population or augment the population that you destroyed or partly destroyed.
Yeah.
It's an option rather than a either or.
Right. That would involve a whole nother year or more.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's often how we do things is planting seeds and putting out seedlings as kind of a fallback if the transplantation doesn't work.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say, I mean, kind of interesting because, I mean, I don't know how rare the lettuce is, but, for certain species, we do have mitigation practices that are more than 1-to-1. So, you also could do both. I mean, you could do the transplant and the seed collection, or even seed into the new transplant area, which might actually be a better site for the lettuce long term if there is some invasive control.
Yeah.
Worms off.
Is anyone being distracted by my typing? Because I can't mute my keyboard and have the.
Been driving me crazy all morning. It's just unbelievable. You need to slow down.
I don't know how to.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe the question is, how do folks feel about what Paul is proposing? Like it's a better idea than the proposal from the FloraSag?
Yeah, I don't know how to judge the two. I mean, I'd like, maybe hear from Matt or Bob, I don't, and this is Lactuca, my impression of Lactuca is it's pretty hard, it can be, whatever the big one is, Biennis or whatever, these things seem to do well. I don't know whether, the prospects for the transplanting are really promising or whether it's iffy, so it's hard for me to judge those two options.
I would think older plants would be really challenging to move.
Okay.
I mean, just the nature of the beast. I mean, it probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but this thing probably produces a bajillion seeds. If it's anything like Lactuca that we grow in our gardens,
yeah,
they're very fine and there's going to be lots of them. And if anyone's ever thought about moving a lettuce plant in August, think about that. So that's
I'm guessing being a biennial, it has a pretty deep taproot.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So that'd be pretty difficult.
really not a good.
The soils are pretty
Okay.
soft. Still getting down there and getting a root ball would be.
Yeah, it's
okay.
kind of crazy.
Yep.
You wouldn't hire me to do it.
Okay.
You're already
I
busy
would-
with the airport restoration.
Yeah, we could get that going.
Well, I guess what I'm kind of wondering here is if maybe if we want to vote on a, maybe sort of in theory, we would like to see seed collection and replanting the following spring. And maybe, you know, I don't know, I mean, you could give authority to me to sign off on it, or it could go back to the FloriSAG, or, you know, we could vote on it electronically. I mean, I don't know any of those, but, or, you know, Paul, if you and Bob want to work together and say, you know, kind of just flesh this out, and we're, you know, ESC will sign off on it as we like this approach better than moving first year individual plans. I don't know, thoughts?
Yeah, if I can interject one
Yeah.
thing. FloriSAG has a meeting scheduled, I don't have it right here, but it's like the first week in May, so like 2 or 3 weeks from now. And
Mhm.
we could certainly discuss this, because this is a little different than our usual protocol.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make a unilateral judgment and speak
Well,
for the
yeah.
FloriSAG.
I mean, I'd totally be fine with this, and, but it does sound like, thinking about the ecology of the plant, that, moving a first year with a deep taproot compared to collecting seeds from perhaps a prolific seeder, might, you know, might have a greater chance of success. Yeah, I mean, and I guess in that case, even though, as you know, I think Roz said, there'd be a little bit of a change in the timeline of the project, but it would actually be easier for Belco, though, in terms of their work, not having to transplant. So
Yeah, it would really allow a lot more flexibility for them, and, you know, I mean, which is great.
Would we still want to ask them to wait to collect seeds from the second year plants that are going to be impacted, or would we?
Well, I don't know. I think that's what you guys need to talk about. I mean, if you have a population there, and if these things are producing, you know, copious amounts of seed, I'm not sure that, you know, waiting to collect seed from possibly one plant is really going to make that much difference, right?
If we could get them from the other nearby plants,
Okay, yeah.
like. Yeah, because we don't know how many second year plants will be in the impacted area.
Right.
I mean, we know there's some first year plants there, but they could be all kind of denses.
Right.
looks like Art had a maximum of 10. Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah, that's his estimate. It's
Yeah.
10.
Okay. All right.
And I think that's based on the number of rosettes he saw. I don't know if that's the total number of rosettes
Or
or
that.
it's just a proportion. I think.
Yeah.
He's just estimating it.
Mhm.
That, I guess that wasn't clear.
Well, he actually says both, so that may be the total.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I like that. I say let's send it back to the flag in their May meeting, and yeah, John and Bob, I think, I mean, I would say, given our familiarity with this now, we could vote on this electronically after we get flag advice.
It's all gonna save us on our electric bill because you know who's gonna be paying that $2,500. Not Velco or the CEO. So,
Well, I assume that Art didn't really recommend the seed, option because it's more costly than moving. I mean, is this would this be an appreciable expense?
it looks
No,
like it'd be more costly to move the plants. It's $2,500 because it's, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
How can it be that much money to collect a bunch of seed? I mean, it's,
Well,
Yeah.
they still have to pay the fee. The fee is for the taking.
right, but you're not taking you're taking the plant. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
But they don't know yet how many plants they're
Plus-
actually taking.
Plus, they'd have to pay like Native Plant Trust to germinate and grow the seeds, and then have to pay Art to go out and put the plants back out.
Yeah.
So would actually cost them a little bit more, I think.
Oh, geez.
Okay,
So just so I'm clear, I'll get back to you, Ellen, and then.
yeah, I would say work with, work with John to circulate this. I think we can vote on this electronically after we get
Okay.
advice on the new.
Okay, so I'll just coordinate with John.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Johnny is still on, I assume?
Yep,
Okay.
got it.
All right, let's do the, Rose Root.
Well, this is the controversial one. I thought
Yeah.
the others were gonna be more straightforward.
Oh, boy.
Well, this one is an odd one. So it's from this kind of self-proclaimed amateur plant breeder who wants to grow rosewood, which is Rhodiola rosea. It used to be sedum, and it's known as a in the herbalist community as having a lot of medicinal uses. I mean, it's pretty widely used. And I would just add, we had a woman from the Vermont Center for Integrated Herbalism, I think I have that right, come to one of our Flora Advisory Group meetings. This is a few, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not quite that long. And she went through our T&E list and pointed out things that were of major concern with collection. And this was the one of the ones she highlighted. She said, wow, people would go bonkers over this. It's, analogous to like ginseng or a golden seal or something like that. It has a lot of herbal uses. So this guy wants to get seeds from the population on the Green Mountain National Forest and grow them and then test them for medicinal uses. And I guess I would say, well, a little bit of information. This is a perennial plant, but it's dioecious. So there's male plants and there's female plants. So even though the Green Mountain National Forest site has probably 1,000 plants or more, at best, only half of them are going to be producing seeds because females. As it turns out, on our inventories, it seems like male plants are much more common than female plants. So, maybe there's a few hundred at most seed producing individuals. But be that as it may, the seed collection is probably benign. I mean, I can't imagine it's going to impact the population. The population is pretty inaccessible. The major threats would be, well, if the herbalists found out about it and started collecting, but there's also, rock climbing is a potential because it grows on cliffs. And also, it's south-facing, oddly enough, even though this is the more northern plant, more northern affinities. It's south-facing, so heat and drought during the summer is definitely problematic. So, getting back to what I was saying, the seed collection in and of itself is probably benign. What for Flora Advisory Group members got hung up on is we've never allowed taking of a listed species for commercial purposes. And that's essentially what this guy wants to do. He wants to test this for medicinal purposes or medicinal properties. And if he finds it has it, he wants to then grow them commercially in like his land. And I forget, he told us where his land was. So I responded to him. I said, so why you can buy seeds of this plant? And to his credit, be conscientious. His response was, well, the grown medicinally is a Siberian strain. He said, I don't want to dilute the Vermont populations with this genotype from Siberia, or God knows where it's from. And so he's trying to do the right thing, which makes it all that much harder because we certainly don't encourage people to grow plants of some strange provenance. So the other options that I suggested to him were two, that there's already seeds at Native Plant Trust that he could get. So he wouldn't have to collect from the wild, but that doesn't really answer the question, because as I said, collecting the seeds from the wild is pretty benign anyway. So, getting them from the native plant trust is just kind of not really, dealing with the commercial use. The other thing would be, this plant is not rare in Maine. As I said, it's more northern, and that's maybe one of the collect in Maine. And I just got a response from him actually this morning, and he said he thought of that, but he didn't know how genetically similar the Maine plants would be. So this guy is really, I've never met him, but he's conscientious, and he's really trying to do the right thing. And I hate to just, whack him and say, no, you can't do it, and then send him off to, Siberia to get plants.
So I just wanted to note that Mary Beth Deller is on. We can't tell from here. Botanist from Green Mountain National Forest and World Advisory Group member, and she's just listening. And the collection permit application would be on GMNF land. So she's here listening in.
Right. So
Okay.
just to clarify that, he would need a T&E permit from the state, and then he'd also need some sort of collection or special use permit from the National Forest. Mary Beth isn't even acting on that until if and when he were to get this permit. The other concern is, this guy obviously knows where these plants are, but we don't want him, if this does become a commercial success, like, people say, where did you get these, Vermont grown plants? And then all of a sudden, in the herbalist community, it picks all this interest, and it's like, oh, gee, we can go out and harvest our own. Apparently the roots sell for some, Aaron researched it, and he's found something where the roots are like very lucrative. So, certainly don't want to encourage, encourage collection. So just to continue here, our advisory group, I think I heard from 7 or 8 members or something on this one, and we're pretty much opposed to granting the permit. I mean, they were 7 members I heard from. People were very sympathetic and really appreciated this guy's concern, but for a lot of the reasons I mentioned, they just didn't want to go down this road. And I guess the fallback is to maybe, like in Maine, not going to be identical, because a lot of the plants in Maine, at least where I've seen it, it's pretty common along the coast. So obviously different from national park.
Roz, Paul, and Brian.
Well, so if this is all carried out with the plants in Maine, would we still have the same problem where it would create a frenzy and?
Well, you could say these are the Maine grown plants rather than Vermont plants, so.
Yeah.
It wouldn't.
It would be same to his.
Yeah, it would be a direct connection. It's like, oh, these are Vermont grown plants, and then people say, oh, we're in Vermont kind of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there were also some other questions that are sort of peripheral, like how is he going to determine medicinal compounds? I mean, he doesn't mention like, having access to a lab or anything like that. I mean, one person pointed out, if this were a graduate student proposal, for information about his protocol and how he's going to determine the medicinal compounds and how active they are, et cetera. And none of that is provided.
Go ahead, Paul and Brian.
Oh, yeah, this is a tough one, man. This is interesting. It sounds like the Flora Advisory Group is kind of, or not denying this, but recommending against it because of its commercial potential application. And I guess I have a little bit of a problem with that. I think that, if we followed that philosophy with, agricultural crops, like let's say corn, for example, where we're trying to, find disease-resistant varieties and genetic types that we can interbreed with our own corn in order to reduce pesticide use or increase yields or something like that, we wouldn't have a problem with it, or we shouldn't have a problem with it. So that I kind of have an issue with that. I think that, the preservation of this genotype is, somewhat compelling. I mean, if this is a particularly unique genotype that lives on a south-facing cliff, and all of a sudden we get a summer where there's, 10 days where it's 95 degrees and it doesn't rain, and we lose the entire population, that's it, right? And, maybe there could be some, let's say, okay, so he collects, I don't know how many seeds he wants to collect. That's another question I had, but let's say he collects 100 seed, maybe 20% of them have to go to the seed bank, where I don't know if there is any of that genotype there already, or what the deal is, but are there?
Yes, the Native Plant Trust has seeds.
From this population?
Yep.
Okay. So that's not a good reason. But the possibility of somebody successfully growing this plant, that could be a good thing. I mean, it could relieve pressure on the native population. I don't know. People would have to be really motivated to go hang off a cliff to, what are they? Is it just the roots or the whole plant? What are they using?
I think it's the roots.
Roots, yeah. Yikes.
It's not an
So you're
herbalist.
digging roots out of a cliff? I mean, it doesn't sound like a real problem. So I don't know. I'm not so sure I would jump on the bandwagon of denying the permit for that commercial reason. So, but I'll let other people talk.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Well, there isn't a subtle distinction here. We do all the time allow the collecting of listed species for commercial uses. Anytime we allow a collect, often, like whether it's Velco doing a taking, or whether it's, a kind of a housing project, that's authorized for a taking, that's a commercial use. Someone in the housing, the developers benefit commercially. And you might even argue that this is a more benign commercial use because there is some taking, but it is not a taking in the sense of you're losing the individual organism, it's a taking for propagation purposes. So I'm curious whether there are any precedents for that, in our statute or in our past. And I'm actually wondering whether, like Mary Beth, since she's here, whether, at a federal level, those two kinds of takings might be distinguishable, or whether this is a different kind of taking. It's for overt commercial use of the genotype, but we allow all sorts of takings for commercial use, that involve killing organisms. So it is interesting,
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like
Should we,
the taking of an
Yeah.
animal and putting it in a zoo.
Mary's trying to respond, but she can't raise her hand. Mary Beth, do you wanna chime in? She put something in the chat.
Well, I mean, I can go ahead and read it. She wrote, it occurs in federally designated wilderness where commercial permit would generally be prohibited. But this is a step prior to that, so hard to say if it would be approved by the district ranger. We generally do not permit collection of sensitive species, but it is possible a ranger would decide otherwise.
So I would just add, there's one other population in the state that's on private I think it's like a land trust or some sort of conservation trust property. So the applicant could always go there if he were turned down by the National Forest. He hasn't brought that up yet, but.
If I could just interject on the commercial use question, I think it's a good question, and I'm not sure what the right answer is really, but I think it might be useful to consider the analogy of, say, a herp species that was of interest for the pet trade, and people wanted a permit to collect them out of the wild in order to captive breed them for the pet trade. It's not exactly analogous because we're not talking about actually removing the full plant, but it's that kind of use and commercial exploitation of this species that's different, as Brian was saying, from the kind of use that occurs in incidental take permits for, commercial construction and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, commercial exploitation is it's a powerful term. Yeah.
I don't know. I think Mary Beth's comment about the wilderness designation could put an end to this whole conversation. But that said, I think this individual should be somewhat commended for coming forward and asking for this permission. And I worry a little bit about just denying it out of hand because there's a potential commercial use here, because the message that's going to send to others is don't ask.
Yeah, exactly.
If we're feeling like it's not going to have a significant harm to the population and may actually have some benefit, then I don't know why we would oppose this other than, I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, but I guess just the commercial thing, I'm not sure that's a deal killer for me.
Yeah, I already thanked the applicant a couple times for actually approaching us. I did him on that, and he's playing by the rules, which, he said not everybody would do. So that's a valid point.
When does this plant flower and produce seeds?
Gosh, like midsummer, I'm thinking it's a while since I've
Okay.
So I'm a little unclear about the national forest thing. So it sounded like I'm hearing two things. One, that it's a wilderness area, so you categorically can't collect anything. But then I thought I heard someone say that, well, it would be up to the ranger. So which is it?
She cannot unmute herself and I can't unmute her, so
But she's typing right now.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of ancillary because, I mean, first of all, we can't speak for the National Forest, so we shouldn't let them affect our decision.
Yeah.
Secondly, there is a second population, which this guy could then say, okay, I'll collect here, which is not on the National Forest.
Doesn't the federal rules sort of trump our regs?
Well, let me put this out there, and I guess maybe maybe May is going to be challenging, but I guess I'm kind of wondering if it makes sense to say something at the Endangered Species Committee was not, necessarily as knee-jerk a reaction about a permit for a commercial purpose, but would like to send this back to the FloraSAG for some additional consideration, because it seemed like what we've got for advice was kind of just a little wishy-washy, and like to see a little bit more definitive kind of sideboards. I don't know. I mean, I guess at this point, I'd love to hear more from the SAGs and that sort of.
But I did ask the applicant if he's available
Okay,
may actually come to our meeting if he expressed interest. I didn't run that by Clyde yet, so
okay,
let's see if we run the schedule for him, but,
okay.
yeah, it might be worth pursuing and at least meeting the guy in person to see, how legitimate he seems. Paul, I just wanted to respond to your comments about having a backup in case this population suffered major loss in the wild.
Yep.
He's going to be growing it in a garden type situation, so I would not consider that as a backup at all. We're not trying to introduce a new population here. This is very different. I mean, admittedly, he might learn something about germinating and growing the plant that then he could, pass on to people who wanted to do the introduction. But this in itself would not be, we would not consider this an introduction of a new population.
No, I realize that, but the plant, the genetics,
Yeah.
the plant would still exist if the population got wiped out.
You can steal seeds from him.
And it
Okay.
does sound like it's interesting that it can grow in cultivation where its habitat is pretty rugged and specific. Anyway.
Right, we're way out of our agenda time here. I'm gonna say, so why don't we go with that? We're gonna send it back to the Flora group and I guess at least with the message that we're not maybe get some more details or some conditions that the Flora SAG might would like to put on it. And we do have one more item if people can stay around for another just hopefully minute is Kent does have one proposal for a new member to add to the invertebrate SAG, Spencer Hardy. And Ken, I don't know if it looks like you're still here, if you want to say words about Spencer.
Yeah, I'll just make this really quick. So it was a unanimous vote by the ISAG to add Spencer. Spencer's been working with wild bees for quite a while now. He worked on our bumblebee atlas, and he's been heading up our wild bee survey in partnership with the Fish and Wildlife Department for 3 or 4 years now. And he's probably in Vermont one of the few people that can actually ID a lot of these bees. It's pretty amazing what he can do now. And he knows them really well. Has done a lot of field surveys. So we would really love to add him to our SAG for his bee expertise. Plus, he's really into some other groups too. So we just think he'd be a great addition to our SAG.
Fair motion to approve Spencer for the invertebrate SAG.
Yeah, I would like to make the motion to approve Spencer Hardy.
I'll second it.
To the SAG. Yep.
Great. Any discussion? Jim?
Not on this, but immediately after.
That's adjourned.
No, I just quickly would like to say I think this is like a great thing. Spencer's super kid and just really smart and
no brainer here.
No brainer.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Congratulations, Spencer. Okay, we got, well, Jim, go ahead.
I would like to thank Rebecca Chalmers for her 15 years of service on the Reptile and Amphibian Scientific Advisory Group. She just asked to step down just recently, and we'll miss her help and her service.
All right, thanks for that, Jim. Bill?
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to let people know that the natural history collections at UNVM are having an open house on May 1st between 11 and 4 at our present location at Blundell. So we're trying to highlight some of the collections that are available at UVM of animals. So it will be vertebrates and invertebrates that'll be on display. So I invite any of you to come if you're in the area.
Thanks, Bill. Would you say May 1st?
May 1st from 11 to 4.
All right.
Thank you.
We're at Blundell now on the Redstone campus.
Yep. Are we good? All right. Well, excellent. Thanks, everyone. Great meeting, and appreciate all your input, your work on this. And do you have it in front of you, Roz, the date for the September meeting?
That was September 22nd.
September 22nd for the fall meeting. So I'll see you then. It looks like we'll probably have a little bit of email work to do on some of these flora permits in May, but otherwise, yeah, enjoy the spring.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your work,
Thank
everybody.
you. Nice to see everyone.
Thanks,
sort of.
everybody.
Kent, I can't believe you stuck around. Bye.
All right.
For Spencer, exactly. Yeah,
Hey, I like plants too. Come on.
nice.
Spencer, you're there. Oh, wow.
Thanks for that, Ken.